Welcome back to another episode of RNT Fitness Radio, and today I'm joined by one of the smartest guys in the world of bodybuilding and body composition, Dr. Scott Stevenson. Scott's been training for over 30 years and has a level of experience few can match in this industry when it comes to optimizing and maximizing your muscle building and fat loss efforts. He's a big believer in keeping an open, beginner's-minded approach to finding what works, while blending his experience, Western science, and Eastern medicine all together. In today's episode, we talk about the role of genetics, inter-individual differences between people, the skinny fat solution, and why the consolidation phase should be seen as only the start of your journey. What I enjoyed most about today's chat with Scott was going deep on human psychology, the importance of creating tribes, and exploring altered states of consciousness in life. It was a real pleasure to speak to Scott here, and I hope you enjoy it as much as we did.
That's a stunning backdrop you've got there.
Yeah, that's the pool cage.
Oh wow!
Oh. Yeah, So it's not bad. Not complaining.
No.
Yeah, it's not a bad place to be. I just the house is not functional at all.
So, whereabouts you calling in from?
I live in Tampa, Florida.
Okay. Yeah. I've been there once.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, Busch Gardens is here. People know it for.
Yeah.
Disney World's in Orlando, which is like an hour and a half away, something like that. So
yeah, I was in Tampa early last year actually. So I got to see a little bit of it. I was there for a conference, and then I must have popped into. I was staying quite nearby MI40, and which I know I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yeah. I'm going to do Ben's podcast eventually.
Yeah.
I've been playing phone tag with him now for who knows how long. Several months, but were you there for the ISSN conference?
No, it was more of a business conference. I was there for, and then I just tied it in with seeing some gyms while I was around.
Right. Where else did you go?
What, in Tampa?
Yeah, or around the area.
Just different places to eat, different bars. Not many. Sorry,
Ybor City.
Ybor City. That rings a bell.
YBOR. Yeah.
Yeah, that rings a bell.
A drunken bell, probably. Yeah. That's the Tampa. It's not far from Ben's gym, but that's where people go. It's the downtown bar district, so to speak.
Oh, so have you always been in Tampa?
Oh no, I've lived 15 different places, something like that. I've lived all over the place. Yeah, I lived in. I grew up in Illinois. I've lived in Tennessee, Georgia, Florida, Arizona, Texas, Colorado, California, 3 different places in Germany, and several places in different cities in those states. So,
Germany, what brought you to there?
I was a foreign exchange student, and then I went over there and worked for a while after I graduated from college.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah, I lived in Munich and went to school in Regensburg, and then lived in Nuremberg. Worked in a plastics injection mold factory in Nuremberg.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, it was fun. It's actually a very foreign exchange for Americans, especially because you can go drive for hundreds of miles. And, for 100, like dozens of hours, and still you're around Americans. Being a foreign exchange student is very eye-opening. So it was definitely a life-changing event to have done that, and then went back over afterwards. So,
sure, sounds good. Yeah. Just by way of introduction, I realized I haven't introduced you to. This is one of our RNT coaches, Nathan.
Hey, Nathan.
And he really want to jump on the call with you today. And,
sweet.
And bounce some ideas around. So
yeah, right. It's an absolute pleasure. I've been listening to you since Geared Up podcast and
shit. All right.
So
way back when.
Yeah, way back when. So everything you've done, I've kind of been following it. So I don't normally ask to come on the podcast with some of the guests, but I was like, no, I really, really want to come on this one. So
that's awesome, man. Very cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. I remember Nathan was a huge fan of fortitude training. He ran quite a long cycle of that back in the day.
Did it work for you?
Yeah, huge. It was like one of the first ones I ever really, really stuck to, and it kicked my ass, but it was good.
Did you try to jump in right at one of the high tiers?
No, because I would listen to a podcast Jordan Peters did, and was like, you know, when it says go with the tier that you go to, go to that tier. Don't go above it. So no, I was like straight on the basic one.
I've had so many. I mean, literally, and it's a good sign in a way. But you look at it on paper, it's like, oh, this is nothing. It's pretty easy. Yeah. People go right to tier 3 and they just get annihilated. They just destroy themselves. And
I did that.
Did you really? Yeah.
I thought I'd do it, and then a month later, I was like, I think I should start at the beginning.
Yeah, everyone tier 1 just to learn. Like, you can spend a week figuring out how things fit together, and then you do it right. Because sometimes you can get a little confusing if you're trying to zigzag back and forth, and you're a little bit, into the workout. You've just trained the legs. You're not sure what to do. You want to make sure you've got your wits about you to some degree when you're training that hard and you're doing something novel. But yeah, tier 2 is where most people end up. Tier 3 is outrageous unless you're just like a machine. There are lots of people that can do that. They just are kind of really rugged. They put together with good recovery, but it's not always the people that are the largest. A lot of times the hardest training guys can only use like tier 1 because they train so freaking hard. And those are a lot of times the biggest guys too. So,
what do you think is the biggest differentiating factor in the individual differences that we see in different trainees? You just mentioned quite a few different factors there.
Is this part of the? We should be recording this.
We're rolling.
Oh, we're rolling. Oh shit. Okay. I'm just kind of shooting the bull.
Yeah.
So, all right. So ask me the question again, because there's so many different ways I can tackle
that. I just like to keep a conversation. That's why I just hit record at the beginning.
Sneaky bastard, you.
It's why I'm on my best behavior.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, you mentioned quite a few different individual differences there already in people's response to training. Can you speak on what you've seen, both in your own experience and what the research has shown as to why people respond so differently to different stimulus?
So that's actually the last word that kind of can throw the answer so many different directions is what you said. The last word you used, stimulus.
Stimulus, okay.
And the stimulus is a function of voluntary effort in most cases. And it's funny because Paul Carter, I think, is who directed you to me to bring me on here. And he and I literally were just talking about this today. We've been bantering back and forth. He's got a article he's putting together on for T Nation, and it's basically addressing this idea that volume is the driver, sometimes even like the primary driver of muscle growth. And there's a dose response to some degree with training volume and muscle growth. Obviously, if you just do one set every 2 weeks, that's not going to be enough. And at some point in time, there's going to be sort of an inverse U type relationship. You add training volume for a given individual training in a certain way, and you're going to reach an optimal level based on all the other things that are going on. And then there'll be too much training volume. But the thing that changes that largely from a stimulus standpoint is how hard someone's willing to train, what they're willing to do. I think, and this is what Paul doesn't go into, this has always kind of been my stance. If you look at resistance exercise as a stimulus for muscle growth, the thing about it is that the intensity of effort, the loading, or you can look at it in terms of metabolic stress, is so outside the ordinary of what we typically encounter. It's something that basically requires adaptation to some degree. So you pick up a weight, you're going to only be able to lift like 10 times. You can only survive that set, so to speak, before you're no longer able to move that weight for maybe 40 seconds. So think about that. Just if we sort of take an armchair evolutionary biologist perspective on this, you've just provided for that particular muscle, you've just provided a stress that either meant do or die within 40 seconds. Like that muscle was unable to continue to lift that load at the end of that set. You took it to failure. That's so different than we typically do during our day-to-day life, especially now because we're so sedentary. Most people, those who aren't working in construction. So maybe you pick up some groceries, you're walking upstairs. We don't have to sprint for the most part. Maybe you like scamper after a bus now and again, but most people aren't doing anything that requires any massive types of effort anywhere near what you do when you're resistance training. Even look at like just running, like endurance exercise. We're kind of geared for like long bouts of locomotion as humans, you know. We can do that. We can adapt to that. And you look at endurance athletes, they don't have more muscle mass. They're actually pretty thin usually. That's a good adaptation for that means of moving. You want to be as light as possible. You can adapt in the muscle with getting more mitochondria and greater vascularity. Sometimes you find in endurance athletes, the muscle cells are actually very, very small because that allows for diffusion of lactate and metabolites out and oxygen in. So you want to have a smaller diffusion distance for delivering fuel and oxygen and getting rid of things that aren't wanted. But weight training is a totally different deal. So if you look at it from that perspective, the thing that's the essential quality of lifting loads of weight training is the fact that the effort is just monumental. So that's what I tend to see in the gym, just empirically over the almost, I'm getting up to close to, I'm more than 3.5 decades now of training. I think it's like 37 years now. So we rounded up to close to 40 years. And the people that train the hardest are the ones that do the best. They're also the ones that are dotting the I's and crossing the T's otherwise. But those are the people that tend to grow the best. It doesn't necessarily mean that they've got the best genetics, but they're the ones that persist. Muscle growth is a very, very slow process. And they're willing to push themselves to the point where they're requiring an adaptation to some degree. They're sort of forcing things in a general adaptation type of paradigm way of looking at it. So effort's gigantic. You can take consistency of effort and desire. And actually, if we really kind of break it down in the different domains, one of the biggest things, and you may have experienced this doing fortitude training, is that you have to enjoy what you're doing. There's an adherence issue. So there's a psychological component there. I like Paul, I just love to train. It's really friggin' fun to go in there and let the screws that are loose in my head rattle around in my skull. I like that. I really enjoy that. So I keep doing it. That's why I've been doing it for so long. But if you don't like to train, if you dread going to the gym, you're not going to continue to do that. So you're not going to make good progress. Eventually you don't adhere, as most people don't, and you just don't continue to train, or you just don't train very, very hard. And there can be, obviously there's an inverse relationship between effort, or quote unquote, as Menser would say, the inroads you make, the extent of the stress that you produce or the stimulus, and the amount of volume of that stimulus or stress that you can recover from. So if you have someone who, puts the pedal to the metal and every set is a death set, lift or die type of thing, you can't get away with 20 sets like that. Just can't be done. But if you're someone who, leaves 3 or 4 reps in the tank or 2 or 3 reps in the tank, you can train with higher volume. And that person would do better with a higher volume approach. So getting back to your question, one of the things that will determine, and I run into this, how much someone grows, is how smart they are with their training, that they don't just bury themselves all the time. I've seen that before too, and I've done it. There's one guy that I have no idea what his name was. Guy used to train at one of the big gyms here in town. It's now closed down. And the guy looked really good. He was a competitor. And I would see him train, and he loved to train legs. He had a good physique, but he just trained like an absolute animal all the time, set after set. Like every training session that I saw him put in the gym, it was a test of his manhood to see how much he could weather. And I'm thinking to myself, that guy could have done like 1/4 of those sets and grown. He would be much bigger, but he just buried himself. So being able to balance volume and effort, and of course frequency, and train smart, learning how to take time off. So programming makes a big difference. And then there's just friggin' probably the biggest one's really genetics. There's, Paul and I have shared stories. My favorite story is a guy, I don't know what happened. This is just genetics of strength at the beginning. The guy had never lifted before. This was when I was in high school. We were bench press testing going into my senior year. And we started off with the younger kids, the 8th graders. This kid he may have missed a grade. He was big for his age, that's for sure. But he was going into 8th grade, and he was a big kid. Like, you should play football. So they kind of forced him out to play football. He was kind of shy, but he just looked like he could just kick ass. If you ever could get the switch to flip and make him into an animal on the field, he would be pretty good. You could just see that he was a strong kid. He never lifted a weight in his life. So we lie him down, and they're going to go just through flights to test the bench pressing. And they put like 95 pounds on the bar. So, like 40 kilos, something like that. And he lies down. He doesn't know what to do. He just reaches up and grabs the bar like all off center. And like, no, you got to be in center. And he's like, what do I do now? And they're like, lift up. And he's like, okay. It's like, you got to clear the bar now. Like literally he'd never even like seen a bench press. Bring it down. He just kind of brings it down wobbly, and then he brings it back up again. 95 pounds, like it was a broomstick. And they start bringing the kids through, and they go to 95 pounds, 115 pounds, 135 pounds. So now we have the big plates, the 20 kilo, the 45 pound plates on there. He's doing that. And now some of his other fellow 8th graders are starting to fall off because they can't bench that much. And they go to 185, and he does that. And the reps look the same. And now the 10th graders and 11th graders are stepping in. Fast forward, I saw this kid bench press 365 pounds.
Oh my God.
First time he bench pressed. It was crazy. And he had probably only done, 12 reps, because those are the reps that he did on the way up of his testing. There was no practice. There's zero learning curve. Like it's phenomenal, right? Interestingly enough, in that same class, I don't know what happened to these kids, because I graduated and then I didn't follow. I was off to college doing my own thing. There's another kid who only bench pressed 95 pounds. He was weak as a cat, but he was 6'7", 340 pounds going into 8th grade. I could say his name was Chad Glossmeyer. He was a gigantic kid, but he couldn't even get down to a 3-point stance. And I mention him because you see people, you can go to the mall in the States here, or you go to a shopping center somewhere, and you'll see these people who are just ridiculously large. I use this, I think, on my podcast. I've said it a couple of times recently because it's a good analogy, is everyone knows someone who's they've genetics basically make them such that it's very easy for them to have body fat. The obesity runs in their family. Just being large is sort of built into their genetics. You can imagine if it weren't a bodybuilding competition, it was a get as obese as possible competition. There are people in this world who could never even hold a candle to other people. Some people get up to be 800 pounds. It's been documented. I think 1,000 pounds has been documented. People get that large. And most people couldn't even get above 350 pounds. You put their life on, they couldn't get that obese. Just couldn't do it. Well, that's genetics, of course, a different set of genes. But that idea resonates with people in the way it doesn't resonate with people who are trying to put on muscle mass, because that's more of an affrontal to their ego and their self-esteem. It's like, no, I should be able to try just as hard or try harder and put muscle mass on as well as anybody in the world. Everyone should be able to be Ronnie Coleman or Dorian Yates or what have you, if they just try hard enough and they take enough drugs and they eat enough food, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, no, you can't. Just like you couldn't eat yourself to 500 pounds. You couldn't do it. Maybe even with all the insulin and adipogenic drugs that you could cut your hands on, you just couldn't get that fat. So you just can't get that large. So genetics are gigantic. And there's some interesting factors there that have been elucidated in the science too. But that's the huge one. You look at, I've got a talk that I've done on this idea, and it's the title of the talk is "Why You Don't Look Like a Pro," which catches people's eyes. They're thinking I'm going to give them a secret. And I have some thoughts as to how to compensate for maybe poor genetics. I can go through that if you guys want to. But what I did, it's a couple years ago now. I went and I looked at the top 10. I think it was like the 2016 or 17 Mr. Olympia men's, just the open, not the 212. But you'd see the same thing in the 212. And I looked at the number of years those competitors took to get their pro cards, and the average was like 3.5 years. I mean, sorry, yeah, to get their pro cards. And if you took, there are two of those competitors. Sean Roden was actually one of them. And then I want to say it was maybe Josh Lenarktowicz, who was an Australian bodybuilder. And they had taken like several years off. So I looked at their first show that I could find and how long it took them to get their pro cards. And if you took those years out, those gaps out, the average was 2.5 years. So on average, and you got guys like Phil Heath too, who competed in the Colorado show. he won his class. The next year, he won his class and the overall in that show. He went to junior nationals. He won that show. He won the USA's. He won that show. And then he won his first 2 pro shows. And that was the year that Phil Heath had won the Olympia. So look at those Olympians. They compete, and 2.5 years later, they have a pro card as bodybuilders. That happens in bikini and some of the other divisions, but not in bodybuilding unless you can't get, that's how good they got. From their first show, they were a pro in 2.5 years. That's genetics. So I could go on and on. This is a phenomenal topic, but that's like an outline of an answer.
What would you say to in people who are deemed as skinny fat, whether it's due to genetic or environmental factors of their lifestyle habits? What is going on there for these skinny fat people, and how is it best for them to get out of this that gray zone that they tend to fall into?
Set reasonable goals. Like what are they trying to know where they're going? Like Paul, maybe you've talked to Paul about this. That's something he and I talk about.
We didn't mention it. No.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So the skinny fat thing is the guy he's not very muscular. He's maybe like 18% body fat, maybe a little bit higher because he's got a low amount of muscle mass too. And he just doesn't have a good kind of constitutive gene expression. When he's untrained, he doesn't look great. There's some guys that just look awesome. They're untrained. You're like, they look better than some guys who've been training for years. So with those guys, first and foremost and this is with pretty much everyone that I would work with or who would ask for my advice, figure out where you want to go. Like what's reasonable? Where do you want to be? And like literally like give yourself some brutal honesty. It's like, what can I really do? What makes sense? And are you lifting because, there are some guys who just want to be big and strong. They like to just lift. They want to power lift or what have you. Well, then put your goals towards that and just do that. And they don't care about looking good on the beach. A lot of guys, a lot of this is, we are sexual animals and we're animals of immediate gratification, right? So a lot of guys who are lifting, they just want to look better. They want to look more attractive, be more attractive. So that in large part, for most women, there are some that like really muscular guys, but that's a matter of being relatively lean. You look Brad Pitt in Fight Club. Remember that physique? And it was Brad Pitt, of course. So he's good looking. He's got, good looking face, and he got really lean for that, but he wasn't giant and jacked. I don't know how tall Brad is. Let's say Brad's like 5'8", and he's probably 170 pounds, something like that. That's not a gigantic guy, but he looked phenomenal because he was really, really lean. So for a lot of those skinny fat guys, and you have to think of this in terms of the immediate gratification thing and adherence. And I picked this up years ago from a guy who, his name's Rod Dishman. He studied exercise adherence for years and years and years, like decades of his academic career. And he finally kind of gave up on it, went into more of a psychobiological approach, and sort of gave up on humans and went and started doing things with rats. And he said, we're creatures of immediate gratification. So you need to have some kind of immediate coupling to any type of health-related or exercise-related behavior with something that's rewarding. Most people, you say, you know what? Chances are, unless you start exercising on a daily basis, 30 to 40 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes, 5 days a week, you're gonna die at 72 instead of 76, and they're 32 years old. It's like, that has no immediacy whatsoever for them. That has no primacy in their motivation. But you take a guy who is, let's say, 18 or 20% body fat, and he's quote unquote skinny fat. He wants to see something and let's say he's someone who's motivated by his outward appearance, and he's dating, and he just wants to feel as an attractive male. You take that guy and say, okay, here's our goal. We're going to try to lose a pound of fat, take you down from you have 30 pounds of body fat right now. We're going to try to take you down to 15, and that's going to get you, close to single percentage body fat. So we're going to spend the next 4 months dropping about a pound of body fat, with doing our damnedest to hold on as much muscle mass. And we're going to take you from 18 to 9% body fat. He will see when he gets to 9% body fat, everyone will, and especially if he's where he can wear a tank top or he's wearing clothes that show his physique, people are going to think he just got huge. He's going to look great. He's going to have abs. It's going to have a phenomenal change on his outlook. And he's going to be motivated to do that repeatedly. He's going to come into the gym. He's going to want to train because he's going to see a difference on a regular basis. He's going to get compliments. And I've seen this in the past when I was in acupuncture school and I wasn't trying to train. I was actually messing around with some fasting and raw food eating and a bunch of things. And I was in the 190s, whereas previously I'd been bulking to be as large as humanly possible. And I was relatively small. That's the smallest I've been since decades before that. And there was a noticeable difference. I was getting compliments all the time, and I was actually seeing someone. So I wasn't looking to, go out and dredge the bars for women, but there was a difference the noticeable difference in how women perceived me because I was just smaller. I wasn't any leaner than I had been, but I was just smaller. So, being lean and small, not being gigantic, being a big hypermuscular bodybuilder, it may look great on Instagram. You may look good for a male ego, but it's not what most women want in most of the time. Probably some of that's the aesthetics, I think. And some of it's just because it's not rocket science to look at some really kind of quote unquote, and this is the pot calling the kettle black here in a certain degree, but look at some kind of jacked up guy across the gym. It's like, okay, that guy is really into himself. He must spend a lot of time lifting. He's all about him. He's not going to be a good partner. He's going to be an asshole, more than likely, who's very self-centered. And women see that. That's the immediate stereotype that conjures. And rightfully so. There's some truth to it. So
speaking from experience, Scott.
Yeah, actually, it's funny. My experience has been with that I get sized up immediately. I can see it in body energy and in the way that, especially women, will see me. And I'm always respectful of that. I can tell they're like, they look at me and they're like, okay, this guy's I've had people tell me he's a player, or they look at the guy. He's a predator. How could he not be? To be that way. And I understand that. And it's kind of like, you gotta, if I walked into a room with a gun on a holster, and you have no intention whatsoever to do anything with it, you have to respect that people are going to see that gun and think, okay, this guy's got a gun. There's a reason why he's got a gun. So you walk into a room as a relatively large guy, people are going to make those stereotypes. They're going to apply those to you. And that's not about you. That's just because that's a normal stereotype. Our brains want to compartmentalize, really, really quickly categorize. Is there a threat? Like, what's going on? They're not thinking, I'm going to spend the next 5 minutes sizing up this guy's nonverbal body language, and see what is he really that? They're just like, okay, I'm just going to stay away from that guy until he proves me otherwise. And that happens a good bit, actually. When I start to interact with people and I smile and I talk with them, they can realize, okay, he's probably not that bad. I'll give him maybe a couple extra seconds to say what he wants to say. But most of the time, yeah, that fades. But right off the bat, it's normal. So anyway, back to the skinny fat guy. I think just having those goals in mind, and if that's an honest goal, is being sexually attractive, then drive your programming towards that. Don't be driven by social media, which just creates absolutely unreasonable physique perspectives so often. What you see, of course, what's presented to you on your phone on Instagram is probably the worst culprit, are the most clicked on pictures because they're people that are at the extraordinary ends of the genetic spectrum, and or they're using lots of drugs that those guys that are the skinny fat guys probably don't want to be using. So you get bombarded by that, and that becomes sort of the norm that you see because we spend so many hours a day on our phone. And then to see someone who's really pretty normal, or to have a physique goal that's really reasonable or normal, seems so kind of pitiful that people want to try to shoot for the stars, and they want to put on 15 pounds of muscle and drop 5 pounds of fat in the next 5 weeks. It's like, it's not going to happen that way. So that's the biggest thing, setting goals that are reasonable and honest. And losing fat for most people is easier than gaining muscle, I think. For just because you can see it, and it's a little more visible, and you get that feedback from other people that you're getting leaner. You can see it in your face. So that's a starting point for that question, I think.
Yeah, 100% agree. And we've always found that for skinny fat guys and women, it's always a case of getting leaner first, and they typically end up much happier with their physique in that position anyway. And then if they want to build muscle afterwards, then that's another goal in itself. But they're in a much better position to do it when they're primed after a fat loss phase.
Yeah. Yeah. They probably feel, I mean, if they are skinny, quote unquote, fat, then they feel fat. The last thing they want to do is get fatter, right?
No. Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, exactly. That's just basic psychology. Keep them happy.
So Scott, you said you've been doing this for nearly 40 years. How did you get into it in the first place?
I know, it's kind of crazy. I would have been lifting earlier if my parents would have allowed me. Actually, I wanted to when I was a kid. I don't remember like seeing like the comic book hero or something like that. Say, oh, I want to look like that guy, or He-Man or something like that. I just remember wanting to lift weights. I don't know why. I wanted to do that. I wanted to do martial arts, and there was no dojo. There was nothing in my hometown as far as the martial arts goes. And when I was 11, I started lifting because they had a weight room at school. And so I was able to start there. Well, actually, I had a DP. Actually, I may have started before that. Now that I think about it, my dad had a weight set that I would sneak up into the attic and use sometimes. So I just had this natural inclination for it. And I don't even know why or where. Maybe I need to go under hypnosis to see what it is that, caused me to have such a derelict desire. But, and then I really I played sports. I swam, I played football. I wrestled for a couple of years. I just love the training aspect of it. I love that's just something in me, probably has to do with the nature of my reward systems in my brain. And they can take rats, for instance, and put them, they can pick out rats, select for rats that they'll make themselves into exercise addicts. You put some rats of the right breed into cages and with running wheels, and some of them will just get on the running wheel and kind of self-soothe on the running wheel and run. And they can create an exercise addiction model that way. And so I wouldn't say I'm addicted, but I sure as hell love to lift. And I just really loved it. I loved the challenge of it, like kind of entering into the zone. It's an altered state of consciousness, I think, which is a totally normal thing. There's a guy named Andrew Weil. Have you heard of him before? Dr. Andrew Weil. He actually lives in Tucson, but I'd known about him before that. He's he's a Western allopathic trained physician, but he actually has his roots in studying psychedelics, and he was part of the Timothy Leary phenomenon way back when with LSD. That's sort of his background that he doesn't bring to the forefront, because now he's sort of a speaker for alternative health methodologies as a complement to traditional allopathic Western medicine. And he wrote a book a long time ago called The Natural Mind. And the main theme of the book, and you can find this in other books too, is that it's a natural, if you look across cultures historically and around the world, you can't really find a culture. There's no cultures that have at least been documented without some instance of it being sort of a natural phenomenon to seek out an altered state of consciousness in some way, shape, or form. So people do it all the time. Like kids will, if they get they'll spin themselves around until they get dizzy and fall down. We used to do, what high risers are, as we called them, where you'd press against a wall or you'd press on your carotid arteries and you'd cut off the circulation to your brain until you'd pass out. You do that when you're a kid?
I tried it, but I didn't have the balls to do it all the way.
Yeah, we would do that all the time. We would do also, like, you like to climb up to high stuff and like scare the shit out of yourself and then jump. People like to jump out of perfectly good airplanes wearing parachutes, or they do motocross or, free climbing. There's all sorts of things. Just people do that. And then there's use of psychedelics and shamanic rituals. That is very, very prevalent in many, many indigenous cultures. So there's something built into us. I could invoke like Terence McKenna here too, who's sort of a really big name in the psychedelic world. But yeah, he's a brilliant guy. He's passed on now, but you want some cool listening material, just pull up one of Terence McKenna's talks on YouTube. And Joe Rogan talks about him a good bit. So he's a big fan of psychedelics. Joe Rogan is, and he talks about Terence. He's had his brother on his show a couple of times. But anyway, in all these cultures, it's normal. It's natural. This was Andrew Weil's book thesis. It's natural to seek out altered states of consciousness in some way, shape, or form. That's what exercise. Why would we run triathlons, like ultra triathlons? what a crazy friggin' thing to do. Like where is, like, literally you can look at, like, where is the survival value in like pushing yourself to the brink of death? Well, we seek that out. It's part of what humans do. And I have theories on that, but so that's what weight training has been for me, is that it's a way to sort of, experience an altered state of consciousness, sort of a form of meditation maybe. And so I started doing that early on, just like a kid who was a daredevil. And I was kind of a daredevil when I was a kid, a little bit. And, it's like doing tricks on the bike and just, all sorts of stuff that lots of kids do. But I sort of, for some reason, weight training just kind of caught my mind or caught my fancy as a way to change my state of consciousness. And I've just stuck with it because it's now also, go ahead.
I was going to say, what are your theories on why humans want to push themselves into this altered state of consciousness and to the brink of death almost?
Yeah. So, I mean,
the reason I asked is yesterday, my main form of training is bodybuilding, but yesterday I ran a half marathon for the first time.
Oh, nice. How are you feeling?
Run. I'm brutalized today.
Yeah, I bet.
My legs are battered. My knees are shot.
Had you trained for it at all? Or you just went ahead?
I trained for it. But before training for it in the last 12 weeks or so, I'd never run more than 3 miles before. So this was completely out of my comfort zone. And while 13 miles isn't quite an ultra marathon, it still pushes you really hard if you're not used to it. So it's very interesting when you said that, because I felt that in the last 25%, I was just in a different place. And I had that in bodybuilding before, but this was something I hadn't quite experienced, and it felt very novel compared to normal.
Yeah. So, God, there's so many bits and pieces of this, and I've never actually tried to formulate it. It just kind of popped in my head, so I'll see what I can do here on spur of the moment. But we're tribal in nature as humans, and there's actually a book by Sebastian Junger. It's his name, called Tribe. He was on the Joe Rogan show. It's just a phenomenal book. It's very short, relatively short, and he kind of documents. He was a wartime photographer, and now I think he actually lives in. He's got plenty of money, but he lives in Brooklyn. I think he lives in an impoverished area, inner city area, kind of intentionally, because he is recognized through his travels, seeing lots of soldiers who've been undergone extreme hardships at wartime, that sort of thing. He knows that difficult times pull people together, and going through extraordinary experiences pull people together. It creates cohesion amongst humans. And you'll see this in when people have trauma bonding. Sometimes it's can be a very dysfunctional thing, or families that have undergone difficult times together. It brings them closer. So I think that something about the nature of those sort of extraordinary experiences, like having to travel an immense distance, having to push through a really hard winter, when you can barely make it as a tribe, as a group of hunter-gatherers, and going through those extreme kinds of circumstances are things that let us see what we're made of, and create the sort of the set of circumstances whereby we have to kind of bond together and strengthen our collective cohesiveness and love and connection to one another, so we can protect ourselves. So I think there's something to say for that's what keeps a tribe kind of connected in a certain way. There's also, and this is an interesting thing. Terrence McKenna had the idea that, and Joe's talked about this, and I've heard him talk about it, that he thinks that some of the brain expansion that happens in humans, or seem to be brain expansion that didn't sort of have any well-known or archaeological explanation. And he thinks that humans that were sort of walking across the terrain in Africa may have come across some psychedelic mushrooms in some way, shape, or form that basically altered their consciousness and brought them to what we might call kind of an enlightened state. They're using psychedelics now to treat depression. Michael Pollan has a book called How to Change Your Mind. You read this one? It's a great book. Yeah. And he goes through some of the science and his personal exploration into this. And when you give people psychedelics into the right sort of setting, and they have an altered state of consciousness, which really kind of defies description. And I haven't done these things. I'm not even going to try to like put words to it. Basically, it leaves them with the impression that the nature of the reality that we have right now, for instance, in this conversation, is essentially somewhat illusory. And that creates a sense of detachment from all the things that cause stress, that cause worry, that rob us of our happiness, and that basically aren't forwarding us in terms of living good, positive lives. So there's something about having gone through a psychedelic experience or gone through an altered state of consciousness type of experience or an extreme hardship, which creates perspective in our minds. This is just me. I'm totally armchairing this shit. I'm not a psychologist. This is my armchair philosopher here speaking, but something about those extraordinary experiences that we have in our lives, especially when we have them in context with other people, gives rise to new perspective that lets us love one another better, lets us connect with one another better, lets us be better people, better tribesmen, and see one another and not be stressed out about bullshit that really is immaterial to what really matters, and that's surviving and loving and procreating from an evolutionary biological perspective. So that kind of ties together the altered state of consciousness, or like running that marathon or the half marathon. You probably had someone, I'm guessing you're an outgoing, a social guy. I'm guessing you have some people you chatted with and you met at that event.
Well, there's a group of 30 to 40 of us that did it together.
Okay. You bonded with those people, right?
Yeah. We trained together. We kept each other accountable throughout the 3 months. We raised money for charity together.
Right.
So there's a great kind of community spirit throughout the day. There's
intrinsic value in that. Like all the money in that you raise, those all has, that's an extrinsic value to help people in those particular ways. But there's an intrinsic worth in that endeavor and that you connected with other human beings. That's psychological currency. That's psychological connectedness. That's just beautiful to have. And it just came about because you ran 12 and a half miles or 12.2, however long it was, 12.3 miles.
13.1.
Oh, sorry, 13. Yeah, you're right. Okay, sorry, I don't want to shortchange you. Yeah. So like the last mile was actually the big money maker as far as that goes. I'm sure that was the tough one.
Oh,
and across the line, we probably know exactly who came across the line right before you and right beside you, right after you. And that's from a humanistic perspective, that's pure gold. So those altered, like if someone, a shaman were to guide someone through a psychedelic experience, that person has done just an immense, loving, wonderful kindness to that person they brought through. They cared for them. They guided them. They took care of them. That's a kind of a parenting type of role that would be then paid forward to someone else that person might do it for. Or like the guy, there's probably someone who's kind of the guide with the training with that group of folks that you did that with.
Yeah, that was me.
Oh, you're the one. Okay, so
even though I've got no experience, none of us had experience in this.
There you go. Okay.
I was kind of saying to these guys, okay, we're going to eat better. We're going to train more. I was helping them with that. It was simple as like, you're going to drink 3 liters of water a day. You're going to be more active from a very kind of bare bones foundation building perspective.
That's beautiful, man. Like you did, that's a wonderful, you probably felt phenomenal to be able to give to those people in that way. And they received that as just one of the most cherished things that they could have done, because you helped them do something they didn't think they could have done. You helped them experience something that was totally outside the norm that bonded them together. That's what life's all about as a human being. So altered states of consciousness are extreme achievements, things that are outside the norm. Not that the norm can't be sublime as well. Just sitting there holding someone's hand can be a wonderful thing, or just, smiling at somebody without saying a word can be sublime and phenomenal. But those types of things are really, they bring us together as people. So I think that's probably part of why we're so, that's just the way that, the universe sort of built us to be. And that's why I think, at least, it's sort of a teleological argument. It sort of explains the obvious in a certain way, but that's why I think those extreme experiences and psychedelic experiences and altered states of consciousness are so important for us. because they give cohesion as humans and meaning.
I think we get that as a coaching role as well. We find that when we help our clients, you bond on their results and you bond on their achievements from a week to week basis, and then over a period of 3 to 6 to 9 months, you form this bond with someone that I'd probably never met before because I'm doing it online. That they now have to consider you a brother or a band of brothers, or a family member, and it makes a lot of sense. It's, psychological currency. I like that one.
Yeah. I just made that up. That's a good term. Though, right?
we'll take that one. It's fun.
We'll keep using that one.
How to build your psychological currency.
There you go. That'd be a great topic for like a seminar series. Yeah, how to become psychologically rich in 3 months, something like that. Psychological wealth. We can you can continue with the terminology. Noah Yuval Harari, if I'm remembering his name, he wrote a book called Sapiens, a brief history of humankind. Yeah, you know this one?
Yeah, I read it.
And he talks about how about 10, 12,000 years ago when we introduced agriculture, and then we started having trading because you'd have crops, and people we basically lost sight of like the hunter-gatherer nature and ways of living when agriculture started spreading its way across the world. And so we lost that tribal way to live. You know the term Dunbar's number? Heard that before? So you can just look in Wikipedia. It's a nice concept. That's basically the idea. It comes from archaeological evidence and evidence of like hunter-gatherer tribes are still around. I think it's something like about 150 was kind of the sweet spot. Yeah, the number of people you'd find in a tribe. That's sort of what we're set up for psychologically in our sort of internal Rolodex. So in a group that size, you would know everyone. If they weren't an immediate family member, they would be the family member of a really good friend of yours in some way, shape, or form. It'd be a very, very small town. It'd be very, very connected to those people. And we're missing that so much. We're just way outside the parameters that Dunbar's number would suggest that we're wired to have in our brain psychologically in terms of having recognizable faces and people and patterns around us. If it's 150 people in a tribe, like you would know pretty much what everyone's up to. And if someone's missing or someone's acting out, the whole tribe would come in and they would make sure that person got back in line and everything was hunky-dory for everyone. Someone dies, it was a tremendous loss. There's these kind of interesting paradigms of framing. You probably heard about these psychological experiments when you ask people various questions about their motivations to like save or do something that would save like one person. So you show them a picture like a singular girl, and you say, would you rush into a burning building to save this one girl or something like that? And people are like, oh my gosh, yes, of course. You see some of the commercials asking charities to donate to starving children, Africa or what have you. You see like one small child, and we connect with that one or two people. And in these psychological experiments, when you pose those same sorts of questions, but you frame them when you're talking about hundreds of people, people's desire to go and do those good acts to save those people goes down. Logically speaking, if you have to do the same thing and you can save 100 people versus one person, you should be even more motivated. That's a much bigger payoff in terms of your sacrifice to do the saving. But we're psychologically not wired that way. We see the singular person, and that's more meaningful to us. That touches us. We connect with that more so. And that probably has to do, I'm guessing, this is just armchairing again, but has to do with the fact that we're kind of wired for sort of small tribes where a singular person lost is a huge loss. It's big. And you wouldn't ever like have, if there was other 100 people, for instance, just using that number, they're probably part of another tribe. So you're not of your immediate concern. They may even be part of a warring tribe that, you don't particularly want to interact with or help. So yeah, like all those things when you're working with clients, or working with groups like that, it was like 30 or 40 people you had in the group, something like that. Yeah, that's a great number, man. It's a little mini tribe right there you got to have. And we're missing that in Western society so often. You know, we don't have one cohesive tribe. We create sort of multiple tribes. I think you might like, you know, that was a tribe you had, and there's probably another tribe at the gym you go to. You know, most people have if they have a good gym, that's their tribe. You know, and then maybe if they have some other sport they do, that's what sports are about. Sports are tribes, really, to a certain degree. You know, that's why people get so fired up about like professional sports here in the States. It's just crazy. It's really amazing how, like, that's like one of the best instances of tribes where people can be rooting for a professional sports team, and there's like 80 guys on the football team or what have you, none of whom are actually from that city, and half of whom won't even be in that city because they're going to get traded. And the team is owned by someone who knows nothing about you whatsoever. You have no connection with them. And you're ready to fucking dump a beer and punch out somebody who says the wrong thing about your team. It's like, whoa, why are you so connected with this? Because we're tribal, you know? So that's played upon by professional sports, and that's played upon in our advertising and various other aspects of our society. But it's beautiful when you can connect, like do a real connection, like what you did with that group. Or what, you know, you do when you to coach people, like you're really making a connection. And that's why you see now, like in the bodybuilding world, like all the, like, you know, teams of people, like you got a coach and then he has his team that works really well. It's cool.
It's how Oxygen worked pretty well in Kuwait, right? That they had they brought loads of people over. Yeah, I've been there. It's amazing. Is a good vibe in there? Yeah. I mean, Brandon Williams was there. Nathan Diashin was there when I was there. All the big dudes. It was fantastic. Amazing equipment as well. So you can tell just from being in the environment.
That's exactly. Yep.
Yeah, we try and do this within our own kind of coaching clients as well. We've just announced we've hired a bar out actually in June in central London where we're from. We're going to hire a whole bar out. And we're going to just bring all our clients and their plus ones into it to celebrate for the evening. So just taking them out of the environment, but it's exactly that tribe creation, community feeling we want to enrich and create. Yeah.
Do you have like a central online thing for all your clients where they all can kind of see and interact with one another, or?
We have a Facebook group, which does that, and it's buzzing on a day-to-day basis. So that's where they all kind of hold each other accountable. And then we actually bring a lot of guests onto our podcast. A lot of clients onto our podcast, and just have them speak about their journeys, and that always touches each other very closely.
Yeah, that's cool, man. There's I was on a board of, actually there's lots of guys I'll run into, because as we're learning, I've been around for a while, so I was there kind of at the beginning of the internet with some of the, even before they had discussion boards, long before Facebook and what have you. And there are people who are on like Intense Muscle, which is a board that you've heard of maybe. Yeah.
You were the founding member, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Dog Crap, Dante, Trudell, and Skip Hill, Skip's board. And I have guys all the time that say, I've been following you since Intense Muscle. And I'm like, it's really freaking cool. And they tell me their names and I remember, you know, and it's just some online handle, but I remember who they are, even though I never met them in person, because it was, you know, it was an online tribe. So yeah, it's good. I think it's good to feed that need, but we just have to be cognizant of how that desire and that connectedness can sort of hijack us as well. People can get really, like with social media, I mean, it can totally hijack our psychology. And I'm seeing this with young kids a lot, unfortunately. You know, there's a huge issue with kids and self-esteem. Like they post a picture up, and if they don't get enough likes, then they'll take it down. And so much of their self-esteem is getting wrapped up in social media in various ways. You know, I'll see young kids who, you may have seen this, who you're walking along and you're in one of those situations where there's just two of you and you're going opposite directions down a hallway or a street, and they'll reach in and they'll grab their phone and look at their phone because they don't want to avoid that. They want to avoid that awkward connection where you'd have to make eye contact or say hello in real life. So it's becoming kind of a surrogate. Online tribes can be a surrogate for real life tribes, and it's missing the limbic resonance that you get when you actually have somebody there. You know, where your emotional brain, the limbic resonance refers to the emotional centers of your brain, being able to connect with someone when you look them in the eye when you see how they're holding themselves. Are they sitting back away from you? Or are they leaning into you? You can see this all the time when you talk to someone. Are they annoyed with what you're saying? Are they really interested in what you're saying? You know, the whole, and Paul knows about this as much as anyone I know. Like, if a woman's attracted to you, does she flip her hair, and does she make really good eye contact? Does she laugh at everything you say? That kind of shit. A lot of that stuff is missing. Instead, now we have emojis to replace that, which, just hate to say, it just does not the same. This doesn't work the same. So as long as we're aware that we're supplanting the real psychological currency that comes with person-to-person connection, you know, by using the online stuff, it's, you know, obviously it has its advantages. We're cool, but I think most of the time we just don't realize, you know, what it's doing to us. Have you seen those pictures? There's an artist who's done some of these, and it's like pictures of, like, maybe New York, maybe in London or something like that. And they're usually kind of overhead, and you look and you see, you know, dozens of people walking on the street, and they all are looking at their phones. Like, oh yeah, you can Google them. There's no one's interacting as people. It's like something that you, like, probably 20 years ago you could have put in a movie like The Matrix, and it would have blown people's minds, because it's like, if you created the scenario connected with that picture, that the phones have mind control, and they've basically somehow taken over our brains, and they're directing us around like robots. You look at that picture and you could totally believe that the phones are doing that, because everyone's looking at their phone and no one's looking at one another. No one's paying attention to one another. And that's pretty telling, because you don't even realize that. Go to the airport. I notice this when I fly, and I like to talk to people as much as I possibly can. That's actually kind of weird for most people, but if I have a chance to have a conversation with someone, I will, you know, assuming I don't have something work to do on my computer or my phone. But you look around and kids are on devices, parents on devices, everyone's on a device. Everyone, literally almost everyone. And we're not aware that that's happening to us. And I don't know what it'll mean 20 years from now, but that's definitely not as nourishing to me to be on my phone when at least I could be talking to someone or looking someone in the eye or meeting someone new. So yeah, the phones, they provide those quick dopamine releases, because, you know, it's so cool. You get a message from somebody and you get a message from someone else, and then Instagram tells you someone likes something, and, like, you're getting this constant flow of stimulation. It's like being a superstar walking down the red carpet, and, like, everyone's saying, "Oh my gosh, look at him!" and they're taking pictures, and you're just getting flooded with all this love and adoration, because you're getting all this information from your phone. It makes real life just kind of boring. It's like, I just have one person to talk to. Like, I'm not going to get, you know, told how awesome I am by people from all around the world all at once. The phones kind of do that to you. I mean, does this make sense to you, what I'm saying? Yeah. This is kind of how I see it many times.
I have the same thing at the moment. So I travel all around as I go, and, you know, on the laptop all of the time, talking to people. And then the best part of my day is when I'm speaking to, like, the bartender, or getting a coffee, or having a little small chat like that. So, you know, those chats and those face-to-face interactions are so much more important than, you know, a million ones on WhatsApp and stuff like that. So you get a lot more from it than anything that's off a device, I feel. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad you're connected with that. But you can feel it. It almost feels empty. Like, when you've gone through a day, it's like it's like the difference between like a drug and eating real food or something like that. You know, it's not real. Just doesn't quite feel the same.
Yeah, I can get to the evening at like 9 p.m. at night and be like, I haven't spoke to anyone all day, and then when you realize you've been on email all day, and then I then have to go and make the effort to go actually outside and go and speak to someone without it looking without it looking creepy.
Yeah. I mean, I've gotten there for a while, because I've worked online for a long time now, and I've had different. I was a college professor for a while, and then I had a gym, and was at a gym. I constantly people flowing in, and then I closed my gym, and then I've had, you know, several years where it was mainly online, and I moved, and I had like days where I didn't talk to anybody, and I would find myself, I have to relax a little bit now, but if I go out to the grocery store and I'm just yapping everybody's head off, it's like, why is this guy so manic? And I'm like, oh, it's because I haven't spoken to anyone for it's been 47 hours since I had a conversation, and that was when I was, getting a drink at the gas station. So yeah, we can be starved in a way that really doesn't feed us emotionally when we're spending too much time online. It's easy to fall into that trap. So the thing that's scary, I think, with younger folks, and it's been happening to us too. I mean, all of us here, we grew up with telephones. It's kind of a bizarre thing, really. It's cool. At least you can hear the voice and the inflections and those sorts of things. The telephone seems so much more live and real than online typing and texting, right? But a telephone's really not the same. Obviously, it's just the voice. You're missing out on, so there's no touch, there's no nonverbal communication with body language or what have you. But we think of phone as being really kind of pretty intimate in a way. And it's not compared to the real deal. So, it'll be interesting to know, and who knows if this is bad or good, but how will things be in 100 years? To what degree will we be, kind of cyborgs, really? There's a book, Norman Deutsch is the guy's name, and it's called The Brain That Teaches Itself, I believe. And he talks about all these examples, really cool examples of neuroplasticity. They can do things like wire in for people who can't see. They can wire in through the tactile, the touch receptors in the tongue, information about their environment. And then the brain will reorganize itself in a way that will allow them to sort of see what's around them based on information coming in through their tongue. You can take people who can't hear and wire in things through their skin that will give them basically kind of a sonar type of way of hearing, the way bats do, for instance. So there's actually a kid as a side. There's a kid who can who's blind, who can use a clicker. I think he has actually a clicker, or maybe he makes a clicking noise, and he can't see, but he's got a really good sense of hearing, which happens often. And he can actually do what a bat does. He uses sonar to see his way around. So you put a trash can in front of him, and he would know it's there. He will wander around it because he's done these clicking noises, and he hears the sound come back. So our brains, there's all sorts of cool examples in that book about how our brains are wired to be cyborgs. We're totally set up with neuroplasticity to take in all sorts of electronic inputs. So we're kind of when we got a phone in our hand all the time, this is pretty close to being a cyborg, And I've got an Apple Watch. You guys, anyone have an Apple Watch? Yeah, I got it because I wanted to use the heart rate phenomenon. I want to do heart rate variability. I bought it sort of as a business thing. It doesn't do my heart rate for shit. My heart rate variability is nowhere near, so it's kind of worthless. But I still keep it because it's easier than to have my phone. But it's got all these haptics, these buzzes that will give you depending on what the alert or the notification is, and they differ. And I can tell what they are very easily. So that's just an example. Basically, this is a cyborg-like device. I get a text message, and it's different than if I'm getting a notification from my calendar, or if it's different than if I get an Instagram notification. It's a different haptic, and I can differentiate those all immediately. I know right off the bat. And this is just something buzzing on my wrist. So that's the first mini step towards who knows what will be in the future, where we could be, everyone could be living in a totally sort of matrix-like cyber type world, and it would feel totally normal to us. Totally okay. And we're getting there. People spend more and more time online with their phones and their computers, which is good and bad. But so who knows, what we'll rob ourselves of to create those future ways of living, or whether we'll figure out, that we're missing out on the psychological currency of true limbic resonance by making ourselves cyber people. I don't know, but we tend to fuck up a lot. So we'll see how badly we fuck up. I think it's not a matter of if, but how much, So anyway, yeah. That was a ramble for you.
I can see it going really deep into, as artificial intelligence gets deeper and deeper, that whole rabbit hole will get bigger and bigger. And then I think we'll come back in full circle. That's my own theory.
Yeah.
Anyway. and that people realize that human connection is critical to our survival and existence.
Yeah, I hope. I mean, it's all neurobiochemical. Really, that's the thing. Is that, I mean, we have this hubris about us as humans, and you see it in like Western medicine. That if someone's depressed, what's the there's someone I'm thinking of who's there's a really nice TED talk about this. Now, there's a rat park experiment, which is pretty interesting. So if someone's depressed, we think, oh, okay, well, we can figure out what's going on neurochemically in the brain, and we just give them an antidepressant. We give them a SSRI or whatever the drug mechanism may be. A lot of times we don't even know what the fucking drugs do. If you look in the PDR, you'll see like one mechanism of action and several others, and then a list of 95 side effects. And so then leads you down the polypharmacy route. My sister's had some psychiatric issues, and at one point she was taking like 8 or 9 drugs. The interactions were just who knows what, because no one had ever done any studies to compare those things. But that idea that we can just take a pharmaceutical and throw it in the brain, it's going to fix things, is really pretty kind of high and mighty when you think about it. So we have a tendency to do that. Have you heard of the rat? I think it's called rat park experiments. Yeah, it's very cool stuff. So you can have rat models of depression, where rats just they don't interact, they don't mate as much as they should. They show signs behaviorally of depression, and you can remedy that just by taking them out of their cages, because rats in labs are in cages, and just put them into this. They called it a rat park. You hear my dog barking in the background, keeping us safe. So the rat park just basically allows the rat to do what a rat would normally do, is explore around and do things. And the idea from that is that if you take people who are depressed and just allow them to do what people do, which is interact with more people, you can fix depression. There's a really nice TED talk on this. If you look up Google Rat Park, I can't remember the name of the person who did this. He's got a really nice position on treating depression just by bringing us back to some level of normalcy of human to human interaction. So we tend to sort of think that we can like step around human nature. And I wonder if, to get to your point there, that we'll come back around, if we'll start to think, we can just fine tune the cybernetics of this. We can just fine tune the cyberspace. We can do everything that we might have gotten and more, and make it better if we just had human interaction. We can recreate the brain neurochemical environment that is just was warm and loving as cuddling up with a warm one on a cold night. If we just have enough shit hooked into your body and the right flood of chemicals into your brain and all this kind of stuff, and then enough things to combat the side effects of that and, everything else. When we're just like need to go back to what evolution set us up for. It's just to be with someone we love at night. Simple as that. So yeah, I think you're right. We'll probably come back around. I hope. You
mentioned Western medicine, but I also know that you're a big fan of Eastern medicine.
Yeah,
and you've kind of dived deep into this area, whether it's for body composition or health, or are you still very much into this?
Yeah, I don't practice right now, but I'm a licensed acupuncturist. So I'm a board certified Chinese herbologist, and I do Tui Na body work and acupuncture. And it was kind of cool. I was on the Mind Pump podcast, and they asked me this question. I wasn't expecting it at all, so we delved into it. That hasn't come out yet. They're holding that into their coffers, keeping it in queue, I think, for a while. But so I was in California, and I was a college professor, exercise physiologist, and I wanted to sort of figure out where I want to go with my career there. There's a place where I was teaching, which I love to do, and I could either do more community outreach or do more research. And I felt that probably my best way to like make a difference was not to try to sit up in the ivory tower and publish things that hardly anyone would see. This is long before social media was around. So I didn't know that you could publish something and then, disseminate it on Instagram at some point down the road. It's kind of cool. But I decided the community outreach, and I wanted to be able to do some nutritional advice. The school was Cal Poly Pomona. So I think at that time it was like 40 or 45% of the students were Asian American. So a lot of children, first or second or third generation of Japanese and Chinese origin. So I figured out in California, you can be a primary care provider as an acupuncturist. It's a primary form of medicine. Actually, the same is true in Florida where I am now. So I looked into acupuncture because then I could do nutritional advice. And the idea would be that I would go and become an acupuncturist, and I could bring that back and then teach classes. We had activity courses there in the department. I could teach Qigong and Tai Chi, and I could teach a basic Oriental medicine class. And it's a great career route for someone to go through. You become your primary care physician. You can bill insurance, all the same things that an MD would do. So that led me in that direction. I took a sabbatical, and then actually I decided that that's sort of the way I wanted to go. And I relinquished my professorship. So I became a licensed acupuncturist. I had a gym, a holistic health club, and then that closed, and then various things tumbled forward. And now I am where I am, doing mainly bodybuilding related stuff, but I still maintain that license with my CEUs and that kind of stuff. Because eventually I'll be wanting to go back and work with people, one-on-one and help people. So I get asked questions because I do podcasts like this, and people know, and that I know a little bit about fixing injuries and those sorts of things. I get asked questions all the time, which I can't do. I can't do telemedicine. Even if I were licensed and I was practicing, I can't, tell you how to fix. I had one on Instagram yesterday. I have another one that's in my messages on Instagram right now. People are asking about all sorts of stuff, and I legally can't do that. It would be irresponsible to do that because you can't really see someone in person. You can't get the information you need to really do them the service they need to. But it was interesting when I looked into that. It was it's a completely different paradigm. So Chinese medicine was developed empirically over the course of thousands of years, and the paradigm of understanding how things work with vital substances like qi and yin and yang and blood, shui, and the other vital substances, Jinye and the terms that are used, is just it's a paradigm that fits with what is seen when certain herbs are given or certain points are activated or internal martial arts are done. It doesn't necessarily have a direct correspondence with anything you could possibly measure. It's not like you could stick a chi meter on an acupuncture meridian and get like the current flow through it like you would with an ohm meter or with an ammeter in terms of electric current. Although there are some data showing that there's less impedance along acupuncture meridians than there is other places. And there's no underlying anatomical structure to explain that. So that's kind of fascinating. There seems to be something there. And there's a lot of correspondences too, like the organs in Chinese medicine they're just kind of virtual, they're conceptual organs. So you talk about the liver having various functions, and some of those functions have nothing to do with anything Western medicine related, but some of them actually do. So when the liver is diseased in Chinese medicine, this is the conceptual energetic liver. You can see a yellowing of the eyes, which is of course what you see when someone is jaundiced, when their Western liver, the organ has been toxed out for some reason. So there's all sorts of things that correspond, but some of it is just like, you would look at it as a Western scientist, say, well, how you can't measure that, like this idea of blood or whatever. That's just woo-woo bullshit. It's like, well, no, it's not really. It's just a conceptual model which has application to the real world in terms of using these modalities which have been tested through time. So it's a totally different way of knowing. In Western science, you're like, show me the data. You're going to make that claim, justify it with some data. I want to see the numbers to substantiate this in some way, shape, or form. And in Chinese medicine, the data are in the results that have happened over the course of centuries, millennia with individuals. And some of the concepts are not things that can be quantified. So it comes across as really woo-woo. And I had to talk about suspend your disbelief. I had to like suspend my disbelief, for months and years on some of these things until I started seeing them work and had some experiences clinically that I did. But I knew that they did because there is some science to substantiate it. So that's when I look at it through the perspective of something I actually learned from one of my teachers who was a Western scientist, ways of knowing. This is actually in my Be Your Own Bodybuilding Coach book. At the last chapter, it's about kind of being a critical thinking bodybuilder. There's all sorts of different ways we can know something. Like you can know something because you just sense it in your heart of hearts. Like you intuit it. It's like there. Or your mom told you it, or your grandmother. She said, this is how it is. And just know that it's been a guiding directive in your life. And the reason why you know it is because of that source that you just trust without question. And then you can know something because, there's a meta-analysis that was done, and there's the forest plot suggested that this is the way the effect size goes. Like, okay, cool. I can believe that. I'm going to hold to that for now. Or you can know something because these are concepts that have been derived over the course of centuries in Chinese medicine, and it holds true. And you see these effects happen, even though there's no real reason why they would, that you can connect up from a Western anatomical or physiological or scientific reason. There's like the seasickness bands that people wear. You've seen those that fit on their wrist. There's a point called pericardium 6, which is right here, that works phenomenally for nausea. I told the story, I think, on the Mind Pump episode. I had like food poisoning or something like that. And I was taking some classes when I was in California still before I moved to Arizona and finished school. And I felt awful. I have an iron gut. I actually threw up in the parking lot on my way in to go to the clinic for just a regular treatment, just so I could get more knowledge of Chinese medicine. And I laid down as a student there, student practitioner. And he said, how you doing? I'm like, I feel like shit. I just threw up. I'm so nauseous. He's like, let's take care of that first. And he's like, just lie there and relax. He put needles in both points on either arm. And like 10 seconds later, he's getting more needles. Like, how you doing now? And I'm like, what the hell did you just do? He's like, what do you mean? I said, I feel fine. Like my nausea is totally gone. It's like, okay, good. So what did you want to work on today? And I'm like, hold on. Like you just did some voodoo shit on me, man. Like what did you do? How did that happen? It was amazing. So that I've seen that there's a point down on the shin. It's about mid shin, kind of on the lateral aspect of the tibialis anterior. It's called stomach 40. People can Google that if they want to. It has empirical effect on the shoulder of the contralateral side. Yeah. It's called the magic shoulder point. Yeah. It works ridiculously well. You're nodding your head. You know something about this?
Is this similar to what Charles Poliquin used to talk about?
I don't know.
I don't know if you're familiar with his stuff, but he was talking about Chinese meridians, and he was connecting different points.
Yeah, these are Chinese meridians. These are points on the meridians.
Different bodies connecting to, I think, external rotator strength or flexibility in the shoulder from the shin. Or something like that. It's something similar.
There's a point, like we used this once. There was an older woman who'd come in who'd broken her collarbone, and they just put you in a sling, and she was in a sling for like 3 months, and it's been like a year and a half since that happened. And her shoulder was frozen. She couldn't do anything, couldn't raise her shoulder. So we did Tui Na and some points, and we treated her sort of constitutively with, whatever her energetic weaknesses were, and helped her out that way using the Chinese medical paradigm. But we also used that point, and you put the needle in, and like let's say she could get her arm to here, and that was all. Like it wasn't going anywhere. And for those who are listening, I'm like just barely 90 degrees abducted. And then you put that magic shoulder point in, and literally you just see her arm raise another 15 degrees. It's like, how did that happen? And she wasn't even conscious of it. So I've done that with people. I've done it in the gym. I was asked and said, I'm going to like to touch your leg. I'm going to do something which I think could help your shoulder. Like, oh, sure, no problem. These are people I know, And I press on that point, and probably 9 times out of 10, they're like, what the hell is going on? It works miraculous. And there's no connection there. It's on the other side of the body. Doesn't seem to be, you can call it trigger point, but there's nothing like it's on the leg, and it's affecting the contralateral shoulder. So where's the connection? There's a whole system there's actually several systems of balance. There's like Dr. Master Tongs and Dr. Tans, again, Richard Tan who's passed. Those are two like the big names who've had these balance systems. And basically you look at various ways. I'm not going to go into all of it, but you basically needle in order to sort of balance out the left and right and the top and front, top and bottom, and the front and back of the body. You just sort of seek to balance things out and use very few needles. It works. It's very simple. Once you pick the system of balance you're going to use, it works phenomenally well for all sorts of shit. I've seen it do it. And maybe some of it's placebo. Very likely that it is. There's a guy, I just talked about this on another podcast too. There's a guy who wrote the book, The Web That Has No Weaver. It's a great book on Chinese medicine. Ted Kapchuk is his name. And brilliant guy. He was an acupuncturist, and now he started studying the placebo effect as a Western scientist. And they put out a research article in like 2015, 2016, and they've isolated like 28 different genes that seem to be somewhat determinant of someone's susceptibility for a placebo effect. And like 26 of those 28 genes have gene products that are targets of pharmaceuticals. So that means that most of those genes that are involved with whether you have a placebo effect involve gene products or proteins or something physiologically, biologically, that's a target for some drug that is being used on the marketplace to treat something. So most drugs, 26 of those gene products, many drugs are targeting genes that are involved with a placebo effect. That's why we have huge placebo effects in studies. It's the most reliable effect you'll find in studying any type of drug is the placebo effect. It's always there. And it actually is getting stronger, like in studies of antidepressants, because people are seeing all these commercials. They have these. I don't have a TV, so I miss them here in the States now. They have these in the UK where you see a commercial and it's, you see it's for an antidepressant, and like 3/4 of the commercial are all the legalese talking about side effects, and no claims are being made, but it's, some woman like bounding through a field of flowers because she's so happy.
No, we don't have them.
Okay. Well, we have commercials for drugs. You see them, it's a big deal, like the Super Bowl. There's probably some on the Super Bowl. The commercials are basically trying to make people aware of the drugs that can treat their fibromyalgia or their depression or, whatever. There's even drugs now that treat the side effects of other drugs that they're selling, that they're doing commercials on. So people see those, and now they're starting to realize, that drugs treat depression. So over the course, this is the one explanation, over the course of many years, when they do clinical studies to see how well drugs work, the placebos are getting better and better because people are expecting the drugs to work because they've been given that expectancy because they watch TV where they're told that drugs treat depression. So placebos are gigantic. They're huge. And there's probably some placebo involved with Chinese medicine, obviously. But if it works, it works, And when I go in and when I work with someone, I'm always I want to use as much of that placebo as I possibly can. I don't care how it works. If I were a scientist and I'm trying to do a basic research study and elucidate the mechanisms, well, yeah, then I want to know because that's the information I'm seeking. If I'm a practitioner or I'm a coach, and I want someone to drop fat as best they can. And this is actually a really interesting thing, like in the coaching literature too, like you want to give your clients as much expectancy that they're going to kick ass as they possibly can. And that's not, you can actually be lying to them, but sometimes there's actually a study of elite Olympic athletes where they asked them whether they would be okay with their coaches lying to them about giving them substances that weren't actually what they said they were, because the coaches were trying to elicit a placebo effect. And most of those athletes were cool with it. Like, I don't care, whatever it takes. Hypnotize me, tell me it's going to work, as long as it works. So that's gigantic. Just believing something's going to work. There's a whole topic there with placebos is tremendous for actually making it work. So that's the best thing you can do. If you like, the worst coach in the world would be the one like, shit, you're not making good progress. Maybe we could try this. But when you watch it, like, right? It's not going to do shit. It's like, no, I know exactly. Here's what we're going to do. This is going to work. This is going to be phenomenal. Holy shit. I can't wait for your next check-in. You're going to look badass. I'm thinking like 20 pounds strength on all your lifts. Here we go. Let's do this. That's going to work, right? That's just positivity, but that's expectancy. That's applied human psychology right there. And that's brilliant. That's what mattered.
We talk about that in our team meetings all of the time.
Okay.
Like when people come on board or we employ a new coach, that they kind of, some people have their air of let's say how confident they are in their own ability to get results with their clients.
Right.
With their emails, and at the beginning of the email, they're like, maybe we'll start this, or maybe there's this, and maybe there's that, and it's like, no. You have to tell them that you're going to get this. This is what's going to happen, and this is going to be fantastic. Right.
Yeah, and that's a tool that can be wielded in the wrong hands too. Like sometimes you can have that's how you get a lot of idiot coaches out there. And I don't want to make this negative, but there are lots of bad coaches that are great salespeople. So they give people some false hopes, and then they just give them generic, God, I've my girlfriend. She's a pro women's physique division competitor, and we've been talking. She's a coach as well and personal trainer, and she comes across some of these training programs and diets that are there's cookie cutters you can possibly be. They're just awful. Just some terrible things that are out there. So, all the placebo effect in the world's not going to correct something like that. That's just totally off the wall. But yeah, you're right. That's funny that you see that with the new people. They're not very very confident.
Belief is paramount.
Absolutely. Yeah. Biology of Belief, Bruce Lipton. That's a great book. Another one. I got books in my head today. I'm not usually books names, but you caught me on a good day, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. And speak about your own book. You got a new book out. Do you want to talk about your own book and what it's about and where people can find it?
You like the philosophical stuff, right? This is kind of what the podcast is about. I'll get all
we like the mushy stuff. If we can get you to cry,
So one of talking about intrinsic goods or intrinsic value, I found, and I've really never had I've never had a coach. I've just kind of done this on my own because I found that I derived the most value from that. You learn the most from your mistakes compared to your successes. Your failures tend to teach us the most. So I've had plenty of those, and I've kind of just over the years. This is part of my personality and has to do with my family of origin too. So it's not purely philosophically driven, but I learned so much just in kind of figuring out my own way. And when I started, back in the Stone Age, there weren't coaches. There was Joe Weider, and that was just about it. There wasn't anyone doing it. Chris Aceta was around still, and he was, coaching his wife at the time. And Chad Nichols was just kind of first coming into coaching, but there wasn't a bunch of coaches. So I just did it on your own. You talk to people. And now I think a lot of people, because it's a scary thing to try to transform your body or your self-esteem so wrapped up in that, we hand off so many things off to coaches that could be tremendously rewarding, intrinsically valuable learning experiences. And you can increase the value of what you get when you've made a transformation if you've been able to engineer that yourself. And in the book, I use the analogy of, imagine you wanted to climb to the top of Pikes Peak or what have you. And you could just hire someone to fly you up there with a helicopter and put you at the top. That's not quite as exciting as having done it yourself. So that's what my book, the Be Your Own Bodybuilding Coach book, is about. Is basically, here's a map that shows you some of the trails you can take to climb to the top of the mountain on your own. So when you're there and you've made those changes and you've achieved that summit, it was you who did that. And a good coach and this is not to disparage all coaches, a good coach is someone who will lead you just as much as you possibly need to be so you can drive as much as you can. Some people are just gonna, pardon my French, they're gonna lose their shit in the last 4 weeks before a show, and they won't be able to make good decisions. And that doesn't make for a good experience. So having a coach, a Sherpa, so to speak, to guide them to the top is good, right?
So Scott, we love a good mountain analogy. It's one of our favorite.
That's why we're holding back the laughs.
That's why we're smiling at you.
Okay. Oh, you guys use mountain analogies a lot, climbing the mountain?
All the time.
Okay, all right, good. Found the right show. I didn't know that. I just happened upon it. But
so when you said summit, and then you said Sherpa. Oh, that's a new one.
Okay. He's really piling it on today.
Yeah. We'll have to add that one to our list.
Okay, good. Yeah, Sherpa. Yep. So that's what a good coach would be. And you can be your own Sherpa, so to speak. You can be your own Buddha. which is where the notion, that's what I was thinking through when I was trying to come up with the name, be your own Buddha, be your own bodybuilding coach. And ultimately, I was stealing this from Alan Watts, who's an English beatnik philosopher that I love. Phenomenal guy. You can find him on YouTube and written a bunch of books. One of my favorite is You're It. And basically that, like, you are everything is what is captured in that. And also the game of tag, like you're it. Life is a game. Life is a dance. And just play it as well as you possibly can. Enjoy the ride. And one of the things that Alan says about gurus or about coaches, that sort of thing, is that ultimately you're the person who makes the call. Really. I mean, you're the one who's making the decision to follow the instructions that are given to you. And sometimes you can just lay yourself out before a guru, let them do whatever they say. But you have made that decision to do that. So you're the ultimate guru. And the question becomes really to what kind of guru do you want? Do you want someone else to be the guru, or do you want to be your own Buddha? And that's what, Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, basically said, is that you can guide your own way, make up your own mind. And one of my favorite Zen koans is, if you see a Buddha in the road or you meet a Buddha in the road, shoot him. And that doesn't mean kill anybody. That means if you come across someone and he steps up and says, I am your guru, I am your Buddha, it's basically someone who's trying to usurp your own authority as the true and penultimate guide in your life. So that's someone that you should eliminate. Shoot that person, because they're trying to rob you of your autonomy, of your independence. And in this case, I think in many cases, coaches can be robbing people of the value that can be derived from making that journey and learning through those steps. Like just learning things like, gosh, it's just something as simple as like label counting. You've got a coach that just gives you a diet and then you just do it. And you don't have any idea what macros you're eating or what kind of food or why are you including salmon instead of steak? What might salmon have in it that steak doesn't have? Like, what would be the point in that? Well, a good coach is saying, well, we need to have EFAs. There's various biological reasons for doing that. They're essential fatty acids, may enhance the protein synthetic effect of amino acids. They may uncouple oxidative phosphorylation, help with fat loss, blah, blah, blah. There's a million things there. You don't know those things because you're just eating the salmon because he told you to. So you miss out on that knowledge.
Would you argue that it depends? So, Scott, would you argue that it depends on the level you're at with those sorts of recommendations? For example, if you've got someone who's got a low knowledge base, would you want to start more simply, like, okay, you're going to have the salmon, and then as you build routine, as you build habits and systems, then you build the educational layers on top of it?
Actually, I would not look at it in terms of how advanced someone is. I would look at it more in terms of the person's personality and sort of their proclivity or inclination to want to be their own coach or be a sponge. So someone who is just, and that's kind of how, I'm at one end of the spectrum. I have to, I realize that. I just wanted to learn. I'm a sponge. I'm very, very curious. I like to learn. So I wanted to figure all this out on my own, and I'm a pretty independent person. So that's what I did. And someone who's like, they could be a rank beginner. And you say, that's the person who will go and will spend hours combing over Google and reading things and gathering information. And they cannot know jack diddly when they start. And 3 days later, they're asking like pretty dang good questions that might even trip up some pretty good personal trainers because they're deep thinkers. And then they're interested.
Guys, yeah. Details guys.
Yeah. Right. And they want to know, and they want to be able to, maybe they're a bit of a control freak too. I'm not going to rule that out. Yeah. Right. So, and then other people are like, no, some people they just like the physical, the driving activity part of it. Just like they want to be a soldier. They actually drive more out of just tell me what to do. I will do anything you want. I don't care how hard it is. You tell me to, eat 95 bananas, I'll eat them. You want me to eat them in 5 minutes or 6 minutes? And I'll finish exactly on the button. Whatever the bizarre requests are, I'll do it. That's where they get their pleasure out of it. So some people lie differently along that spectrum. So it would depend, like if someone obviously knows nothing, you'd have to it would make sense. Like don't just throw them out there into a sea of information and misinformation, which is why I put my book together, just to sort of glean what I think is good information versus a lot of bullshit that's out there, to give people a good, clean map, as opposed to a map, have a sea of maps. You don't know which one's right. Hopefully they like my map as a possible map, a good one. But it gives them some direction. So if someone's like a rank beginner and you give them some information and let them derive from those starting points as much as they can, like you say, you take them to the, I'm going to use another analogy here, but
go for it.
Take them to the sea and say, you know what? I'm going to give you, this is in this area for this fish, you should use these grubs. Earthworms aren't going to work. The fish love these grubs. Now you go fish. You've given them some information. Now, if they're an advanced person, you might just say, go figure it out. And they're going to have to figure out what kind of fish are there, and then have to survey and say, okay, this is a really deep, we're going to have to go with something with a weight on it. They would be able to come up with all sorts of different strategies to find the fish. Whereas the beginner, you'd give them lots of hints, and then give them enough room to learn and grow, such that they can drive as much as they can from it. So you bait the hook for them, so to speak. Tell them where to fish. And then they get to drive. Look, wow, I got really good at this. Okay, now let's try something different. What about this? So you up the ante. A good coach will do that with someone who's so motivated, and give them, just like a good guru would, is not, you don't give them all the information. You don't give them the fish. You teach them how to fish incrementally, depending on how fast they're learning and how fast they're figuring things out. So my book is kind of a brain dump. I like put a lot of stuff in there, but it can kind of be used that in that way. I called it a reference guide, as well as sort of a year-long plan. So it gives people strategy, post-contest, off-season, and pre-contest, how to strategize things, set up goals, like look at the whole kind of from a year-round perspective. Most people compete once a year, so they're kind of on a yearly, annual cycle. And then if you like have a question about something specific, I have a pretty massive index, or if you get the PDF, it's highly hyperlinked. So you can click and just bounce around from topic to topic. Let's say you want to, find something on the EFAs, as we talked about, being a fish. And so you could just do a find on the PDF, or you could go to the index and click, and it'll take you to the section on fats, and it'll take you to the section on supplements, and you'll find that listed in various other places. There's tons of information, and I think it's a 420 page book or something like that, and I have over 2,400 plus references in there. So it's kind of took a while. So yeah, it's a monster. So like you're reading through and you're like, oh, there's reference 1836. That looks like an interesting one. You click on that, it'll take you in the PDF. It'll take you to the index, or sort of the list of references. And then most of those you can just copy the title and go to scholar.google.com, or just click on it if it's got a hyperlink there. And then it'll launch the paper. And then you can go down the rabbit hole. You can start chasing those things down. Once you're in the paper, then they've got another 100 references, and then you can start learning as much as you want. So it's a reference guide to sort of launch people in directions of deeper learning, but it's also like, here's your big plan. First of all, what are your goals? You're after, if you're after the show, okay, you're gonna have to take care of yourself so you don't rebound like a motherfucker, pardon my French again, and end up in a very bad position. So that's a really important part of the year. So I cover that much more than I've seen most people do, because that's highly neglected by many, many coaches. They sort of get you the show, they get your pictures, and they just throw you out, and say, okay, figure it out. And most people have a horrible time post-contest. Yes.
If we were to talk about the mountain analogy, this thing you're talking about now, we call it the safe passage home.
Yes. Okay.
So once you're at the top of the summit, then you've got two options. You can either roll off and fall down the mountain, or you can take the long, safe passage home.
I can't believe we're talking about this with Scott Stevenson. This is fantastic.
It's absolutely true, though. And I'm going to add something. Here's one aspect you haven't gotten is climbing. And because I lived in Colorado Springs, actually. And coming down Pikes Peak is the worst part as far as potential damage to your body, because you've got tons of eccentric muscle damaging contractions when you're going downhill. That's a model of muscle damage. People don't get sore climbing the peak. They get sore coming down. And the people who screw up, who try to train for that, are the ones who don't train coming back down, because they can make it to the top, but they come back down. First of all, it just wrecks their knees. It's kind of like going down steps can bother your knees, but they'll just destroy themselves. If you haven't gone down more previously, it's highly damaging. So going down elicits that protective effect, that repeated bout effect that protects you from future muscle damage. So you're right. Like the safe passage home, super important. Even we can apply that, like going down the mountain is where you can get hurt the most, is coming off the show, so to speak, coming off the mountaintop. That can be just diabolical. And the horror stories, they're abound, right?
Oh,
with
yeah, for sure.
Rebounds. Like there's the worst I ever heard was a guy who gained 60 pounds in, I think, 5 days. And he started eating right after the show. And then they went to like a gas station. He started eating and he just kept on eating. He gained 60 pounds. Finally, his buddies had to come over to his house. He was in his bathtub. He couldn't really get out of the bathtub. He was just there. And he had pitting edema all over his body. On his shoulder, you could stick your finger into his delt and lose your whole finger into his delt because the water was there. He was a big guy. He just had water everywhere. He had 60 pounds of water. It's like he had an anaphylactic reaction to ho-hos and donuts and pizza and stuff. It was really, really bad. They had to take him to the hospital, put him on Lasix, et cetera, et cetera. So it can be terrible what happens after a contest.
So basically an avalanche, that one.
Yeah. But still, it's like psychologically, it's such, and I talk about this in the book, it's such a, especially for a first-time competitor, you guys have probably talked about, you've just reached this pinnacle in terms of how you look, and people now start seeing you in a different way. And like, what do you do with that? You're going to have to let go of this. It's like someone who got really, really rich, and they become known as the person who drives the nice sports car and has the nice house. And now they have to move out of the mansion, and it's like they're driving out of the rich neighborhood with their crappy U-Haul. And everyone's like going, you used to be rich, you used to look good. Now you have to go back to once you were. So people don't want to do that. They try to hold on because that's their identity. Now they've re-identified themselves in a way that they really worked hard for. And it's hard to hold on to that because now you've achieved something you never thought you could in many cases if someone's a first-time competitor. You want to stay at the top, but there's no oxygen up there. And it's cold. You don't have any food, right? You're going to die, literally, right? You're not eating enough. It can't be maintained. It's not sustainable. It's not a sustainable environment on the mountaintop or in the internal environment of your body, depending on what the person did to get there. So, yeah, I love that analogy, the safe passage home. I may you throw that in the next edition. Yeah, if you guys don't mind.
Hey, go for it.
Yeah, because you hear about so many, like literally, I always build that into a coaching plan I do with someone. I always keep in contact with them. And ideally, I like that's part of the deal. We're going to get you through the show. And then, and I have various ways of sort of refeeding afterwards, reverse dieting. I cover this in the book. It's another topic. I don't know how long you guys want to talk for, but we can keep going, obviously, because you're laughing. But yeah, there's like the various ways to do that. And having some plan, having some route to take is what so many people are lacking. It's like, so what do I do now? Holy shit. How do I, do I just stay here? Yeah.
We're massive on this. And we call it the consolidation phase because essentially you need that period of, say, 3 to 6 weeks to just essentially consolidate and get back to normality and have that safe passage home. Because if you don't, the psychological and physical trauma can be tremendous and long lasting.
Yeah.
And you have to build up. You have to plant the seed of the plan after, way before. So what you don't want to do is you don't want to say to them 2 days before their deadline. For us, we don't really deal with competitors. We deal with general population, but it's the same thing as human psychology. So we don't say to them 2 days before their fat loss goal or their photo shoot that, okay, you're going to do a reverse diet now. It's planted like weeks in advance. Because we say to them, that's not your deadline. That's your checkpoint.
Right.
That's the checkpoint in the journey. And then once you've achieved that first transformation checkpoint, you then consolidate and take the safe passage home before you
imagine you've been lit up. You're at the top of the mountain with your Sherpa, and you get there and you're like, you raise your arms in victory, and you turn around and all the Sherpas are gone. Like now you're like, what the fuck? How do I get home? They just leave you hanging. That's what coaches would do. They leave you hanging up there. And you're scraping your way down, right? Trying to find the way back. Yeah, that's perfect. That's what I do, especially with someone who really isn't like a lifetime, full bore, all out competitor, who's kind of made to be hardcore. They're kind of doing this as a life-changing event. they're married, they have children, they may never compete again. And you got to think, okay, so what we want to do this because this is sort of a goal to get in really good shape. Maybe you're going to do a photo shoot or what have you, but what is sustainable for you? Is the goal even reasonable, of course, but what's sustainable thereafter? So you make a life. That's why I have a kind of a year-long plan. You have to consider all those things along the way. And the post-contest that's the start of the book. That's the first part of the book. That's the first big main chapter. I have goal setting, like in the main chapter, the next section is post-contest, then off-season, then pre-contest. Yeah. So a lot of people skip to the pre-contest, I know, because they tell me, but the post-contest is the first part.
Yeah, we do something very similar. We do with those type of people. We call it a lifestyle solution, and where basically you reverse engineer what they want from their life, what they want from their day-to-day food, training, all that type of stuff, and kind of work things in. And then after that consolidation phase, after their diet, they go into something like we call an investment phase, which is effectively the off season for general population, where we go into like teaching them all the various different things. So it's nice to know that you start in that phase as well. It's super important.
Yeah, I like that. I like those terms too. Yeah, those are nice.
You're like this one. We relate muscle building and building a lifestyle solution as like investing into the stock market, and how you deposit pennies over a long period of time for a long-term reward in the future. Because, the muscle building doesn't take time, nor does building a lifestyle solution. So it's very much like in the stock market, you can't just put money in and expect it to come out the next week. You've got to let your money work hard for you and spend time depositing the pennies. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And stay on top of it, and watch after it. Of course, pay attention to the market. How's your body responding? You're pushing too hard. Like, you may have to auto-regulate things along the way. You may have to change you can't eat chicken and rice all the time. That same investment strategy that worked when you're dieting down is not one you can continue to do necessarily. You may have to have something else. I'm cracking you guys up. Because
this is all we do speak on a day-to-day basis. We talk in analogies, and this is how we go with this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, Nathan bought me a book called "The Art of the Metaphor" or something like that.
Yes.
So we love analogies. So hearing you speak in all analogies is great.
I've always been that way for some reason. I write that off as being a sign of intelligence. I think it's just I don't know how else to talk, so I just delude myself into thinking it means that my brain's working well, but it probably is not. But it seems to help though. With lots of folks, it does seem to help to be able to use the analogy, something they connect with. Yeah. I try. One of the things too that I always try to do when dieting, think people down for that transition, and this just fits with the way I think things work best. Is I use a nutrient timing approach that will have them eating a lot of sort of normal foods. Like I will have there's these Amy's cheese-free pizzas that I eat as a post-workout meal that are pretty healthy. They're cheese-free. Amy's is a kind of a health food brand here in the States. They're delicious. I had either some tilapia or a chicken breast on there. And I'm eating pizza all the way up to shows. I've done this probably most of my shows in the last decade or so. People are like, you're eating pizza? I'm like, yeah, it's a cheese-free pizza, but it's delicious. It's great. And so I create the diet in a way that as much as possible matches what some normal day-to-day food would be. And that's a big meal. I can go and have that with friends. A lot of times I'll do sushi, although, all you can eat sushi. It's a very kind of standardized meal, but it's a meal I can go out and have with people. I'm not always eating from Tupperware. It's not, full-blown orthorexic type of dieting. And so I think there's probably something going on in the brain in terms of neurotransmitter balance. I'm getting on a regular basis because of this nutrient timing approach, also this psychological benefit of having very sort of normal, satiating meals on a regular basis. So I haven't gotten to the point as many people do when they diet down where I'm just feeling absolutely and utterly, totally deprived. And then really pretty subject to the abstinence violation effect. That psychological phenomenon called the what the hell effect. Have you heard of this before? It happens quite a bit. So the idea is from smoking cessation or alcohol treatment programs where someone has violated their abstinence from something like alcohol or cigarettes. So they're an alcoholic and they go to a party. Let's say they just have one drink. It's just whatever. They just grab a drink, when the waiter passes by, they just have a drink. And then they're like, oh shit, I just had a drink. fuck, I might as well fuck it. And they just go for it. They just, it's a what the hell effect. And they just start drinking. Or someone who smokes, they smoke and they smoke a cigarette. One cigarette would make any difference at all if you were thinking logically, but there's a psychological phenomenon, this of having violated their abstinence that leads to like an avalanche of negative behavior where they just continue to do that. And that happens, I think, when people are dieting and the diets are too strict. And they're like nothing but chicken and rice. They don't get any cheat meals. They don't get any break meals. They don't get any normal meals. And it makes it such that if they don't have one of those breaks, like a diet crash, where they just lose it, for like a week or so, when they get done, that's whatever's underlying that abstinence violation effect psychologically comes into play afterwards. And then they just go on a binger because they haven't been having cheese-free pizzas or sushi or any of those things, and the social interaction that comes with that. So
I've got a question on that. How do you build that into a general population person's diet who anything apart from, let's say they've never tracked before, they don't never even considered eating protein, vegetables, and carbs in a diet, and anything that you do from a dieting perspective is now considered abstinence of their own freedom or their own ability to make choice. Let's say, they used to eat pizzas, they have a curry, they have, everything they want, their family make food. How do you incorporate that same principle into a person that's general pop? Because then obviously for us guys or for you specifically, having that pizza or that sushi stops that effect. But right. I don't know if that would work with the general population who don't know that.
Yeah. I think a important part of that is having the perspective of having chosen one's path, and having chosen one's food. So I get asked questions all the time. I'll go someplace and I'll get like the how much do you bench question, or like, what should I be eating question, or what should I be taking question, like there's big blanket questions. And it's someone who, a lot of times, if they're sort of in a stages of change model, in this case, they're sort of pre-contemplators or they're contemplators. They haven't really adapted any behavioral change, but they're thinking about what they should do. And I tell them like, okay, pick 5 things, be they foods or behaviors that you should be doing that you aren't, or you shouldn't be doing that you are. And I'll say, like, what do you mean? I say, well, how much beer do you drink on the weekends? Like, oh, I drink a lot of beer. I'm like, okay, if you wanted to get where you're going, you should be drinking that beer. And they're like, no. I said, well, why don't you cut the 10 beers down to 2 beers? Okay, cool. I can do that. And like, it's a lot of times as a Hispanic person, I've lived in the South, the Southwest. I'm in Florida now, or when I was in Arizona, a lot of guys are eating a lot of enchiladas, a lot of fatty meat, cheese, cheese-based Mexican foods, lots of sour cream, that kind of shit. That is a big culprit for lots of people who are Hispanic or Mexican American. And so you can kind of pick out those sorts of things. And then, so with someone like that, who's come to you, I ask them, just like, tell me from your common sense perspective. Some people really don't know. Some people are just completely oblivious, but tell me what you think, or give them as much information as you can to let them make the decision as to what they should or shouldn't be eating. So it's their choices. So like an alcoholic wants to drink alcohol, right? Like that's their preference. They would, but it obviously has negative effects on their life in various ways, but they would like to choose, like to drink alcohol. So that abstinence violation effect comes into play when they get to do something they'd rather be doing. So if you take someone who's like a regular average person and you say, okay, we're nailing things down here, and they don't have like any like strict, like in 12 weeks, we're going to have to get from this place to this place. Depends on the person, their goals and their commitment, what have you. But as much as possible, to address your question, let them pick the things that they want to do, that they think make sense. So they're like, I go and get coffee at Dunkin' Donuts and I get a Long John cream filled every single time. It's like, okay, do you think you should be eating those in order to get where we want to go with your plan here? Like, no. I said, does that make sense? Would you be motivated to take that out? Do you want to get to our goals more so than you want to have Long Johns on weekdays? They're like, no, I want the goals more. It's like, okay, cool. I like that decision. That seems like that's one you're down for. I think that makes sense. You do. We're doing that. So now they've chosen. It's not like you pulled the beer or the cigarettes away from the drinker or smoker. You've let them decide, no, I don't want that. Here you go. You can have the Long John. So as many choices as they can make. and as much of their food that fits into their lifestyle, like a lot of times you'll have like housewives maybe who cook for their kids. Their kids are just want to have they're not like trying to force healthy choices on their kids necessarily. The kids want to have sloppy joes or whatever it is the kids may eat where you guys are, or what parents may make, macaroni and cheese or something like that. So it sucks because mom has to eat like rice and chicken, and the kids are having macaroni and cheese and ham, and like that's much better. So maybe mom can take the macaroni and make her own macaroni and not add the artificial powdered cheese in there, and use chicken breast for herself, and put some yellow food coloring or something on there, or maybe some garlic powder that makes it yellow. And she likes garlic powder. And then she's having mac and cheese with her kids while they have mac cheese and ham. And so she gets to do fun stuff, but she's making, and those are choices that don't seem like they're just completely withdrawing her choice and the fun out of life. So as much as you can make it like literally, not like doing a Jedi mind trick on people, but allowing them to actually make that call themselves. And this is what I think being a really good coach is about. And this doesn't happen a lot. When people send you the canned diets, it's like, that doesn't take any of this stuff into account. It happens a lot. But when you say like, what are your favorite foods? What do you like to eat? Tell me the foods that you like best. And then when they say, burgers and pizza and macaroni and cheese, you say, okay, so let's try this. How about the Amy's fat-free cheese pizza? How about we start buying burger meat that's the extra lean, and we can add some spices in there that'll make it taste better, and we can do the mac and cheese the way I just mentioned. And now you've got them eating the same foods they want, and you've removed from that pizza, 400 calories per pizza, because it's now a cheese-free pizza. You've taken a lot of the saturated fat out, et cetera, and you've now created, with the foods they want, alternatives. You can get people, you probably know this, I'll have people just by cleaning up their diet, eating the stuff they know they should, that they still kind of like, they'll lose fat. You can get just cleaning people up, just getting them off the standard American, the SAD diet, or the equivalent over there. So that's what I say is as much choices as they have, and the less of a sense of being deprived by an outside controlling force telling them to do something they don't want to do, the less likely they're going to have to feel like they've violated anything. Because if it's your choice, you're not violating any abstinence. You're not really abstaining in a sense. You're just doing what you want to do. And that's a sense of locus of control, I think. That's really important, depending on the person. But for many people, I think in this case, that they want to have a good central locus of control to feel like they're making, and I like this is how I prefer to work with people, is let them know that they have some control over things. That also helps in the long term. Like one of my big goals, and this is part of the book, is to have people become autonomous and independent in terms of being able to maintain a lifestyle that fits their fitness and their body comp and whatever their desires are. So they don't always have to have a trainer. It's like teaching, someone to walk with a crutch, and they can't walk without the crutch. You want them to be able to walk on their own. So the more central or internal locus control that they have, the better they are, I think. And so letting them choose those choices, then they become smart. They can go out to, a restaurant, and they can have pizza with the kids, and they just scrape the cheese off because they're used to having cheese-free pizza, because they learned that. They chose that. They already know that. So you made them wiser. You've taught them how to fish, basically. You've actually taught them how to fish in their own pond. And now they can take those fishing skills, try another analogy, and they can apply them when they're fishing at another pond, or when they're across the pond, so to speak. So
perfect.
Yeah. So those are some ideas. Hopefully that answers your question somewhat.
Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome.
Cool.
Scott, let's finish up on some rapid fire questions.
Uh-oh.
We've been speaking about food a bit recently. So what would be your go-to meal when you finished a contest diet and you're absolutely shredded? What's your go-to meal straight after?
The same one that I have. I love sushi. I have sushi and sorbet afterwards.
Oh, sushi and sorbet. I know you're big. I always see your all-you-can-eat sushi events.
Yeah.
So
I just did that. Yeah, that's it. I love that food. Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm not a big I've never been a big dessert person. I don't know why. I didn't have no dessert trauma. I didn't get beaten with a birthday cake when I was a kid, anything like that. I just don't like sweets. I love sushi. I love sorbet, which is sweet. But anyway, rapid fire. Yes. Next question.
What's the one country you're looking forward to visiting?
UK, Body Power. Be there in a month.
You've been before? Have you been to the UK before?
I think I've been to the last 3 or 4 years for Body Power.
Okay, yeah. Awesome. So what's one country you want to visit that you haven't visited then? That's probably better.
I like to go Croatia, I think. Here it's beautiful. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, Nathan was just there a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, nice for vacation, right?
Yeah, it's lovely. It's lovely. Sunshine, Old Town's fantastic. Yeah.
That's what I've heard, beautiful. Yeah, I just keep hearing that. So I don't know much about it, but I hear that. So, okay, that's a good choice then. Cool.
And the last one, who should we have on our podcast next?
Ooh, this is where Paul named me. Victoria Felkar.
She's great.
Yeah, I figure you know who she is.
Yeah, she's great.
So
hopefully she's available. She's pretty busy. What's that?
It cut off on mine a little bit there. What was it?
Victoria Felkar.
Victoria Felkar. Okay, great.
Yeah, she's brilliant. She's phenomenally brilliant. Yeah, you'll like her.
Awesome. We'll have to get in touch with her.
Yep. I'll hook you guys up. She's easy to find, but she's very busy. She's finishing her PhD now, so I don't know how available she'll be. But
awesome.
If not, I'll find an alternative for you.
Thanks, Scott.
Cool.
And where can people find you?
Lots of BeYourOwnBodybuildingCoach.com or FortitudeTraining.net, or it's Fortitude_training at Instagram. You can just type in Scott Stevenson bodybuilding on Google and I come up all over the place. But Be Your Own Bodybuilding Coach or BYOBBcoach.com is where you can get my book. I always warn people that there's tons of pirated versions that you'll find if you just Google. Please don't support the pirates. They're criminals. Buy it from Amazon. People like the hardcover. The Amazon hardcover is awesome. So it's available worldwide on Amazon if you want to get it that way.
Amazing. We'll link those in the show notes there so people can have a look. If you enjoyed today's episode with Scott and you feel other people will share the fun of analogies and wisdom that he shared today, please share it with your family and friends.
Amount of analogies with us.
That's the name of the podcast there.
There you go.
I mean the mountain of analogies with Scott Stevenson.
Excellent.
Please share with your family and friends. For more information, please visit www.rntfitness.com and follow us on Instagram at rnt_fitness. Thanks for listening.